Welcome everybody to our live crochet event. I'm Brenda KB Anderson, and I am very excited today to show you my newest design. It's the Woodland Beanie. So it's a very nice, stretchy, warm, kind of all-purpose hat. This looks great on lots of different kind of, people, different size heads, different tastes in clothing. It's just a good kind of basic beanie with a little something extra because it's got this nice fold-up brim and this really beautiful texture. And so this is actually, I designed this as a companion piece for the Woodland mitts. They've been really popular. They're fingerless mittens that I designed, I think maybe even like a year and a half ago. It was a while ago. But people keep making them, and I thought, well, maybe we should have a set because I don't know. I just really love the stitch pattern, and a couple people had asked me to make a hat version of those mitts too. So here it is. All right, well, I'm so glad that you guys are here. Thank you so much for joining me. I always love it when you guys are active in the chat and then you say hello, or you tell me where you're crocheting from, or you ask questions. Certainly if I'm going through anything in my project that is confusing, or if you just have random questions, that's great too. But I am going to be walking you through all of the steps today on how to make your own Woodland Beanie. And there is a free pattern download, the Woodland Beanie. You can find that link in the chat or in the description. And go ahead and download that. You can do that now so you can follow along, or you will have access to that later, no problem. You can just go back and get that if you just want to watch this for now. But certainly ask me questions, if there's anything that you guys are wondering, or if you need me to go over something again. I just want to make sure that I am being clear. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what we need here. So this beanie comes in, I think it's 5 sizes. Let me just double check here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sizes. Yep, so we have baby, which is this cute little version. And when I say baby, I mean like a little baby, probably like maybe up to 6 months or so. But anything older than that, I would go with the toddler size probably. I always err on the side of making a slightly larger hat because, when they're growing, because it'll fit eventually. And you don't want to make a hat that's too small, but these, keeping in mind though that these are pretty darn stretchy. So I do have a guideline in your pattern. I tell you the sizes they're kind of aimed for. So baby, toddler, child, adult, and a large adult. And then I tell you what the finished circumference is, and I also tell you kind of how to choose your size. So you're going to be, if you measure your head or the recipient's head and measure where you would wear your hat, so wherever the brim of, the ribbed section of your hat would be. And then you are going to make it either 3 or 4 inches, depending on the size, smaller than your head measures. And maybe that sounds crazy, but you really want this hat to be snug on your head so it stays in place, when you're going sledding or whatever you're doing in this very warm hat. So you definitely want it to be smaller than your head measures, okay? And if you're in between sizes and you just cannot decide, what I would recommend is go for the larger size, and as you're working on it, you can try it on before you finish your hat and see if you want to stop there. Because the cool thing about this hat is it is made vertically, so it's made, let me show you, this one is mostly done. It is made basically as a large rectangle, and then you sew it into a tube, and then we finish up the very top of the hat here. So what that means is when you're working back and forth in these rows in this direction, you can stop at any point, or you can add more rows if you need to in order to alter the fit of your hat. So, which is great because as you're working on it, as long as it's long enough, then you can make it to fit as you're going. Okay, so that just makes it a little bit easier. It takes a little bit of the pressure off, especially if your gauge isn't dead on, then you don't need to be so worried about it. So I always err on the side of going to the larger size if you're in between sizes, because you can always fold this brim up just a little bit more, and then you can stop a little earlier if you want to, if you feel like, okay, that's the perfect size. But one thing is if you are altering how many rows you're doing back and forth, I just want to make sure that you're doing it in complete sets of 4. It has a 4-row repeat. So I'll explain a little bit more about that as we're working on our hat, but just a heads up there. You can't just stop on any row and sew it together and have the pattern match up. That's it's not going to happen. All right. So you will need anywhere from, let's see, about 214 to 357 yards of a DK weight, which is a number 3, which is a little bit thinner than like the most prevalent thickness of yarn that you find in the big box stores. So if you think of the large skeins of acrylic yarn that you use for Afghans and that sort of thing in the big box stores, here in the United States anyway, that is the most popular size, is a number 4 here. It is a little thinner than that, just to give you an idea. So it's called a DK weight, and it is a number 3. And then you will just need a couple of stitch markers and a crochet hook, and I am using an F, which is a 3.75 millimeter hook, but you will use whatever size you need to in order to get the correct gauge. Okay, so the gauge is listed in your pattern here. It's listed 23.5 stitches and 24 rows is 4 inches in the yarn over slip stitch back loop ribbing pattern, which if you're like, what is that? I don't know what that means. That's okay, because I'm going to be showing you all the stitches you need to know. But basically, you're going to be making a square that is made with this stitch pattern here, just a square worked back and forth in turned rows. So you can go ahead and chain maybe 26 stitches across and work back and forth in that yarn over slip stitch to the back loop only stitch pattern, which I'll be showing you. Until you get a little over 4 inches, and then just measure how many stitches are in 4 inches. Okay, so get out your little ruler and measure across 4 inches, count your stitches, measure up 4 inches, count your rows, and then compare it to what I have. If you are getting more stitches and rows in those 4 inches, then what that means is your tension is a little tighter. You need to go up a hook size. If you were getting fewer stitches, then you need to crochet a little bit tighter. So then you're going to go down a hook size or 2. So the hook size thing, it's just one of those things. As you get more comfortable with crochet and you start working on your gauge, you usually can look at someone's pattern and just you can start out with what they have, or if you just know you're consistently having to go up hook sizes, maybe you just have to, maybe you start with something bigger than someone suggests and try it out. Okay, so that's just one of those things, getting gauge. All right, oh, we've got some hellos. Sue McFicker is saying hello. Hi, Sue. Great looking set, thank you for sharing. Yes, I am very excited about these hats too. Thank you very much. And Stacy is saying good morning from frozen North Iowa. Yeah. I'm in Minnesota, and it is very cold here today. And Lee is saying good morning from East Texas. Good morning, Lee, and welcome. Okay, so we talked about our materials. You just need some yarn, a couple of stitch markers. So I'm going to be using these stitch markers. They have to be the kind that you can remove, take in and out. And then your crochet hook, and that's it. Alrighty. So I am going to begin by showing you the smallest size, so you don't have to see, so much repetition, me making so many of the yarn over slip stitches in a row. But I will be explaining a little bit between the differences in making the different sizes, because one of the questions I get the most often when people are working from a pattern and they're maybe a little bit newer to reading patterns is they don't quite understand what all the parentheses are about in patterns. So I just want to show you that really quickly. When you take a look at a pattern, for example, here we have instructions. It says beanie, chain 36, and then in parentheses it says 44, 52, 61, and 70. So this is giving you instructions for all the different sizes, and they are listed here in the size that they are, in the order that the sizes are listed here. So baby comes first, and then toddler is the next set of information right inside those parentheses, child, adult, adult, large. Okay, so those numbers correspond to the different sizes, and it'll be like that throughout the pattern. Okay, so anytime you see those parentheses with a bunch of numbers in it, look for the number that pertains to your size, and it will be listed in the same order that your sizes are listed in the front of the pattern. All right, so since we're making the smallest size, we are going to start with the beginning chain of 36 stitches. All right, so there's my slip knot on my hook. and we're going to create 36 stitches, or 36 chains, sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36. Okay, so now to begin with row 1. Oh, I wanted to mention 2 things quick before I forget. This version of the download actually has 2 row 1s, which are exactly the same. You can see here, row 1, wrong side, row 1, wrong side. Just get rid of one of those. They're exactly the same. It doesn't matter. And I will get that fixed as soon as I can. I just didn't realize, for some reason I didn't realize that there were 2 row 1s until this morning. The other thing that I wanted to mention was that if you had downloaded this before today, if you had downloaded it, yesterday, or I'm not sure if it was up the day before, there were a couple of things that I had changed in the pattern. It already has been updated, so if you are downloading this, at the time of this, or at any point today, then your pattern is fine. It's the same version as mine. You just have to cross out row number 1. But if you downloaded it previously, I want to let you know that some of the numbers have changed. I kind of reconfigured how I did some things. Even if you followed it exactly as it is written, you will still get a hat that works out great and it'll look nice. But I did figure out one little trick that I could do in switching around some of the numbers so that all the sizes look the same as we're progressing through the hat. So it would be less confusing when you're watching this live if you're making any of the sizes. It should look very similar. So I know that's a little bit confusing, but basically what I want to tell you is if you've already started your hat, it's still going to work out. You can continue. You don't have to rip it out. But if you have not started your hat and you downloaded this pattern before today, then you should download a new copy because it's just going to make a little more sense with this tutorial here. Okay, so let's see. Oh, we got a lot more hellos. Debbie McClune, good morning from Pennsylvania. Hi, Debbie. And Christy C., good morning from chilly Dallas, Texas. Looking forward to the new pattern. So fun. Thank you, Christy. And Darlene is saying hello from Grand Rapids, Michigan. And Neri is saying good evening from Italy. Wow. Well, welcome, everybody. I'm so glad you guys are here. All right, so we're going to start with row number 1. So we're beginning with the wrong side. And later on, when we get a little bit more fabric, you can go ahead and mark the right side if that helps. But you'll be able to tell the difference as you get further in the pattern. You should be able to tell the difference between the right side and the wrong side. They're pretty different looking. So let's see. So we're going to start with the second chain from the hook. We're going to work into the bottom of the chain and we're going to make a slip stitch into the next stitch. Okay, so here's the top of our chain, has all those little V's. We roll it over so the V's are touching the table, and then you can see all those little horizontal dashes. So that's where we're going to work our first row of stitches. We're skipping that first horizontal dash, which is right there. That's just going to be a turning chain. And we're going to place our hook underneath the second horizontal dash, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then pull through that loop on the hook to be our first slip stitch of the row. Now we're going to go ahead and mark that stitch, especially if you are a new crocheter or newer crocheter, or at least newer to the stitch pattern. Definitely mark the first and last stitches of the rows, and also there will be one other point that I will show you that I like to mark as well, just to help me keep track of numbers so I don't have to count stuff later. Okay, so we did the first slip stitch, and then we are going to half double crochet in each of the next 4 stitches, slip stitch into the next 4 stitches, and then we are going to repeat that section within the brackets either 2 or 3 or 4 times depending on what size you're working on. So we're just going to do that 2 times because we're working on the smallest size. So we're going to start with a half double crochet, so that's a yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull up loop, yarn over, and pull through 3. Okay, we're going to do that 3 more times. Insert, yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull up, yarn over, pull through 3. That's the second half double crochet. Let's do 2 more. Third one, fourth one, and now we're going to switch to doing 4 slip stitches. So we're still continuing to work into that back of the chain where those horizontal dashes are, and we're doing 4 slip stitches. That's 2, 3, and 4. Now we're going to switch back. We're going to repeat what's in the brackets. So we're going to do 4 half double crochets, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then we're going to switch back to those slip stitches, 4 of those. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so I have completed the amount of repeats. I'm only doing 2 repeats. You can see here's the taller stitches, those are the half double crochets, and here's the slip stitches. So there's 1 repeat and 2 repeats because I'm doing the smallest size, so you'll have more for larger sizes. And then I want to show you what happens next here. So after you repeat that, then it says half double crochet in each of the next 0, 4, 0, 4, 0 stitches. So a lot of times I get questions about this. People get very confused when you say to crochet into 0 stitches. They're like, what? Why are you telling me to crochet into 0 stitches? That doesn't make any sense. The only reason that it's written like that is because I am writing a pattern for all the sizes at once. So some of the sizes you're going to crochet, you're going to make half double crochets into the next 4 stitches. And some of the sizes, you're not going to do anything at that point. So if it says crochet into 0 stitches, you just skip over that little part of the information. You don't have to do anything. You're not crocheting anything because there's 0 stitches. Okay, so then after that, then you're going to yarn over slip stitch into each of the next. And then for me, I'm doing 18 stitches. For the other sizes, you might be doing up to 36 stitches. Okay, but basically you're doing a yarn over slip stitch all the way across the rest of your chain. Let me show you how to do that. So the yarn over slip stitch, you start with a yarn over, and then you insert your hook underneath your bottom bump there, back of the chain. Then you're going to yarn over, and you're going to pull up a loop. So this is just like a half double crochet so far. But this is the distinction. Instead of making another yarn over to draw through, that would be a regular half double crochet. Instead of doing that, you are just going to continue pulling that last loop you made through those 2 loops on your hook. Okay, so we're going to do that again. So yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull up a loop, and pull through 2. Just keep pulling that loop through. Okay, so yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull up a loop, and pull through 2. Yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over and pull, no yarn over there. I was telling you a half double crochet. Let's do that again. Just erase that last thing I said from your memory. Okay, yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull up a loop, and pull through 2. So one thing that I think when people are working on this stitch pattern, when you're first learning how to do it, sometimes it ends up it feels awkward to go through that, this loop right here, and sometimes it can get a little bit tight because of that. So one thing that I like to do is I pinch here at the base of where my this loop is and where this loop I just made. I just kind of pinch there with my thumb and my finger, and that way I'm able to pull up with my hook and stretch out those loops a little more so that I can get my hook through a little bit easier. Let me show you that again. So we're going to grab that loop, and then I pinch here and then pull through those 2 stitches. Through those 2 loops. So my fingers are always kind of hopping back and forth. They grab on. I didn't even really realize that I was doing this until so I love this stitch pattern, and I've been using this stitch pattern quite a bit in the last couple of years. And I did not realize that my fingers would hop up and grab onto that until I started getting questions about, well, why I have such a hard time doing that stitch. I feel like it's so awkward. And I kept thinking, why is it so awkward? And so I was trying to do it, and I thought, okay, here I am hopping up and pinching that little area so that I could get my hook through, and I didn't even realize I was doing that. So that's one thing about, teaching other people how to crochet is you really have to slow down and look at what you're doing because sometimes you do things without even realizing it. And it really helps to be able to tell other people all the little tricks and tips. Okay, looks like we've got some more hellos. To Neil saying hello from Clarksville, Tennessee, hello. Nancy is saying good morning from Vancouver, British Columbia. I love learning to crochet from you. This is a great project. Thank you, Nancy. And Marlena is saying good morning from Tennessee. And we have Tony saying good morning from Illinois. Hi, you guys. All right, so we made it to the end of our row. That's row 1. Okay, remember, cross out one of those row 1s. We only need one row 1 here. And then we're going to go to row 2. So we are going to start out our row by chaining 1, and then we're going to turn our work. So just like you're turning a very long, skinny page in a book. And then we're going to yarn over, slip stitch through the back loop into each of the next 18 stitches. Oh, you guys, I forgot to place my stitch marker. So I meant to tell you, we'll do it on this next row, but I meant to tell you the very first stitch that you make that's a yarn over slip stitch, place a stitch marker in the top of that stitch, because that will help you when you're coming back across to know when to switch back and forth, because you're basically switching between the ribbing stitch pattern and then the other stitch pattern that kind of has all those cool waves that sort of looks like cables, but it's secretly not cables. All right, so we already did our turning chain, and we're going to turn our work, and then we're going to do those yarn over slip stitches, but this time, instead of doing it underneath both loops how we would normally crochet. Normally we would put our hook right here, okay, so because we're skipping the turning chain, normally we would put our hook right here, but we are going to place our hook underneath that back loop, which is just right there. Okay, so we're going to yarn over, insert through the back loop, yarn over, pull up a loop, and pull through 2. So that's the very first stitch of row number 2, and then we're going to continue that. So yarn over, insert through the back loop, yarn over, pull up a loop, pinch and pull through 2. I always think about it that way now that I've realized I'm pinching. Pinch and pull through 2. And it helps me when I say that so that I don't accidentally yarn over there, because my body wants to make a half double crochet sometimes. But we don't want to do that. All right, so we're just going to continue working these yarn over slip stitches through that back loop all the way across until we've worked 18 of those for this size. And I'm going to count them up in just a minute here. But basically the point where you switch to the other stitch pattern is right around the halfway point along here. And it'll get a lot more obvious. I mean, it'll get super more obvious when we put our stitch marker in there, but also it'll be a lot more clear as you get a couple of rows worked. You'll just be ready for that change, for that stitch pattern change. Okay, let's see here. And it'll get a lot less awkward. It's always so hard for the first couple of rows to hang on to things. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, one more, and 18. Okay, so I'm placing that stitch marker here in the last yarn over slip stitch that I had done in row 2. Okay, and now I'm going to switch back to the other stitch pattern. So here we are, we've already worked our yarn over slip stitches. Then we're going to slip stitch back loop into each of the next 4 stitches, 0 stitches, 4 stitches, 0 stitches, 4 stitches. Okay, so my instructions are right in front of the parentheses, so I'm going to slip stitch through the back loop under the next 4 stitches. So don't do the yarn over, that's tempting also. So just do a slip stitch through that back loop. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. And, you know, like I mentioned before, for some of the sizes, you're going to be working 0 stitches there, meaning you just skip over that little part of the information. You don't need to do anything there. Then we're going to do a half double crochet through the back loop into the next 4 stitches. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then we're going to slip stitch into the next 4 stitches. 1, 2, 3, and 4. All right, and then we're going to half double crochet. Oh, okay, so then at this point you would do a repeat of these 8 stitches, okay? So you would half double crochet in the next 4, slip stitch into the next 4. You would repeat that for however many more times you need to. We are only doing that once, so we're done for this size. And then we are going to make 4 half double crochets into the next 4 stitches. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and we are still only working those into that back loop, okay? So actually everything from row number 2 on, no matter what side you're working on, doesn't matter, you are always going to be working into that back loop. We're just ignoring that front loop now. Okay, so then we're going to end with a slip stitch in the back loop into that very last stitch. Okay, so we're always ending with a slip stitch here, and we're always starting with a slip stitch, and the slip stitches are always in that back loop only. Okay, so we're going to chain 1, turn our work, and remember what I just said, we always start with a slip stitch through the back loop, so we're going to do a slip stitch right there. This is the beginning of row 3. All right, so we did our slip stitch, then we're going to slip stitch into the next 4 stitches, and then half double crochet into the next 4 stitches, all worked into that back loop, okay? So, and this is gonna get easier. I'm gonna show you as we get a couple more rows in, I'm gonna show you a way that you know what to do next, so you don't have to keep looking at your instructions. It'll make a little bit more sense as we get a little bit further here. So we're gonna do 4 slip stitches, 1, 2, 3, 4 slip stitches, and then we're going to do 4 half double crochets. Now you can see how it's wider, narrower, wider, narrower. So every other row, so let me say, on all of the even numbered rows, so rows number 2, number 4, everything after that, that's an even row. If you come up to a half double crochet stitch, you're going to place a half double crochet stitch into it. If you come up to a slip stitch, you're going to place a slip stitch into it. But on all the odd rows, you are doing the opposite of that. So except for this very first stitch, the first and last stitch, it's always a slip stitch in the back loop. So just know that. Then when you move on to doing your repeats, because we had 4 half double crochets here, we made 4 slip stitches here because we're doing the opposite of what we had. And now we're going to do 4 half double crochets, and it's going to kind of fill in that little dip that you can see there. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. We're still just working in that back loop. And now we're going to switch back to the slip stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4. And now we're going to switch to the half double crochets here. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now we're at our marker, so we're going to switch to the other stitch pattern. So we're going to be doing yarn over slip stitches through that back loop only. All right, so yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, place your stitch marker back in there. Oh, Sue McVicker is saying, I have to admit, I love the stitch pattern, and in haste this morning, I thought the photo was showing a knit hat. I love how the crochet has branched out over the years. Yes, this actually, even the ribbing here, this looks so much like knitting. So much like a rib stitch in knitting, like a 1x1 if it's stretched out a little bit. But it feels a little bit more springy than that. It has a little bit more elasticity, like it wants to bounce back a little bit more than if I had knit this in a 1x1 rib here. And then this part, with all these little V's that you see connected, I mean, it really does look like, it looks a lot like knitting, you're right. And Jody is saying good morning from the Aloha State, Hawaii. Aw, I agree with Sue, looks like a knit. Yep, it does. Okay, so we're continuing along with our yarn over slip stitches. And these are not super tall stitches. They are a little taller than, I think they're about the same height actually as a single crochet. And with this number 3 yarn, it is going to take a little bit longer, than with a thicker yarn. But I have to say, and it's just so comfortable and squishy, and I really just wanted to change things up a little bit. I oftentimes stick to those number 4 yarns because I know a lot of people like to have kind of quick projects. We're all busy with our lives, and but every once in a while I like to throw a thinner yarn weight in there because, well, I love them. And it's just really comfortable, and it's not, it's just a nice stretchy hat. And it's plenty warm, even though it's a little bit thinner than those worsted weight. It's plenty warm, especially with that folded up brim. And this is a pretty dense ribbing stitch pattern here that we're working up. It doesn't let a lot of the cold wind through. All right, so there is our last yarn over slip stitch. I'm going to chain 1, turn my work, and I'm going to start working that same yarn over slip stitch all the way up to my marker. So you just know every time you get to this bottom half of your hat where the ribbing is, you're just always going to be working those yarn over slip stitches through the back loop. That's all you're doing, and then you're chaining 1 at the end and turning your work. And because you're not going to be working into those row ends, it's extra important that your row ends are that you're really consistent when you turn your project. And what I mean by that is, like, when you get to the end, do exactly the same motions every time, whether you are turning it first and then making your chain 1, because I know some people like to turn it first and then make a turning chain. Or if you do it the other way, you can chain 1 first and then turn your work, but always turn your work in the same direction, and always do it consistently, regardless of which method you pick, because if you do that and you make your last stitch, make sure that it's not getting kind of long or loopy or stretched out, then you're going to have a super neat and tidy edge there. Even though that it's the edge of your turned rows, it still looks really good. That's kind of the secret to that, is if just consistency. All right, we've made it to our marked stitch that is marking the last of the yarn over slip stitch pattern. And now we are working on, let's see, row 3. So we have 1, 2, and this is the 3rd row. Oh wait, no, this must be row 4. Let me see. 1, 2, 3, yep, row 4, sorry about that. All the even numbered rows are on the wrong side of your work. And so if you're working a wrong side, if you start with that slip stitch, yarn over slip stitch ribbing first, you're working a wrong side row. Plus, after I get a little bit further, I'll show you the difference between the right side and the wrong side of the stitch pattern, and you'll just be able to recognize it too. All right, so row number 4. We've already worked our yarn over slip stitch section. Then we are going to make a half double crochet through the back loop in each of the next 4 stitches for my size, but for some of the sizes, you're not making any half double crochets at that point, and you're going to jump right into this next instruction. Okay, so if you have a 0 there, you just skip over this, and then you start working from this. But I have to work 4 half double crochets here. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And now we are going to switch to our slip stitches. So we're going to do 4 of those. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. And switch back to those half double crochets. So basically the gist of it, this section here, is you are working 4 stitches in a row. So you're either doing 4 half double crochets or you're doing 4 slip stitches. And to know which is which, see, did I get a little bit off here? Let me just double check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, I'm missing a stitch somewhere. Hang on. Let me just count this up real quick. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. I must have skipped a stitch somewhere. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1. I think I must have skipped a stitch somewhere down here. So I'm going to add an extra one in. Let me just double check. It feels like that's off by just a little bit. Okay, I'm going to back that up a little bit. There it is. I missed it. Oh, maybe not. Okay, I'm not exactly sure where I missed my stitch, but I could tell I was off because I was supposed to have 5 slip stitches in a row at the very end of this. Because I don't want to rip this whole thing out, I probably would if I was making this at home and to rip out a row and then look at it, but I'm just going to add an extra stitch in here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm putting those half double crochets back in here. 1, 2, that's where I skipped it. I see it. It's right there. I skipped it in a row below. Okay. I'm going to add an extra half double crochet in here. So I already have 2 half double crochets. So here's my little trick. So I'm going to combine this stitch with the next stitch by doing this, going through those back loops. Here, I'm teaching you how to cheat right here, you guys. Pay attention. Okay, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, and pull through all 3. So I just did a half double crochet in both of those stitches linked together, but now that loop is a little smaller, so now I can make a half double crochet right here. So I just basically added a stitch back in. And now I'm going to do my 4 slip stitches, and here we go. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then we're going to end with 1 more slip stitch, so that means 5 slip stitches at the end of row 4. Okay, all right, so now you can see this is where the half double crochets are, slip stitches are there, half double crochets here, slip stitches are there. So then we just chain 1 and turn. And the next row is really a repeat of row number 1, except that we are working it through the back loop only. That's the only difference between row number 5 and row number 1. So we're going to start out with that slip stitch that we always do into the very first stitch. So there's our slip stitch through the back loop only. And then we're going to place, because this is a right side row, you can start to see these little wiggly lines here. This is a right side row, so we're going to be doing the opposite. So these are slip stitches that are really short. It's kind of a little dip there, so we're going to put half double crochets here, slip stitches here, half double here, slip stitches here. So we're doing the opposite of what we had. I made that stitch a little tight there. 1, 2, 3, and 4 half double crochets. And now we're going to do 4 slip stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4. And now we're going to do 4 half double crochets. One, 2, 3, and 4. And now we're going to do 4 slip stitches. 1, 2, 3, whoops, and 4. Okay, so now we have worked all the way up through row 5, and we would just continue working those yarn over slip stitches all the way across. After row 5, you've already learned pretty much all you need to know in order to make that big rectangle I showed you earlier. So after row 5, you're going to repeat rows 2, 3, and 4. Let's see, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Another 16 times for this size. So after you've done this far, after you've worked this far up through row number 5, you repeat rows 2 through 5 another 16 times for my size, or it could be all the way up to 28 times depending on what size you're making. And then there's a little note in here about altering the circumference of your hat. So it's telling you to repeat the rows number 2 through 5, repeat that section more or fewer times. So this is what I was talking about earlier, how you can very easily alter the circumference of your hat, no problem, but you have to go all the way through the cycle, okay? So you're going to go through 2 through 5, and then you're going to finish up by repeating rows 2 through 4 once again. So you're going to end this big long rectangle with a repeat of row 4. So, and just so you know, that would mean ending with that slip stitch through the back loop in each of the next 5 stitches. That's the only place where I write it 5 stitches in a row like that. So that's kind of like, that should turn on a little light in your brain. Oh, this is could be a place to end. I could end here if I wanted to. All right, so let me show you what it looks like after you keep repeating and keep repeating. Here's my hat. And now this, okay, so this might look a lot bigger because it is. This is a larger size. This is the adult size here. So I have finished up right here. This was my very last row, was working a repeat of row 4, ending with those 5 slip stitches. Let me just replace my hook here. And all right, we got some more hellos. Hello, Carrie from Spicewood, Texas. She's glad she found us. Awesome. I'm glad you're here. And Travis is saying, love it. Good morning from Central Kentucky. Awesome. Hello. And Debbie McClune is saying, why did you add the half double crochet using 2 loops instead of just adding an extra one in the same stitch? Okay. Okay, so the reason I did that when I made that, so that's not part of this pattern. I just want to clarify for anybody else. What I was trying to do was sneak an extra half double crochet in there, and instead of putting 2 half double crochets into that same loop, what I did was I put a half double crochet into that back loop, then I used my hook and I kind of combined the stitch I just made with the following stitch that hadn't been worked yet, worked a half double crochet into both those loops held together, then I worked a half double crochet into the second loop that I just combined. And the reason I was doing that is because we're working through only the back loop as we're working our way across, and that back loop gets really stretched out. So this is my sneaky little way of adding extra stitches in there without stretching out that loop too much, because then you get like a little window and then you can see it. So it was really just a cosmetic thing. You could have put 2 stitches into that same back loop, but I feel like it just looks a little better. It makes your loops a little tighter when you combine those 2 stitches together, and then you work again into that next stitch that you, I don't know if this is making any sense, but it was mostly just a cosmetic thing. Okay, and Tennille is saying, could we use number 4 yarn? So this was written for a number 3 yarn, but you could use a number 4 yarn and maybe just, if you're okay with your hat being a little taller, you could use the same size that you were planning on, or go down 1 size and see how that goes. As you're crocheting this, you'll get a little chunk done, okay? So you're gonna start here, and then you can see about how tall your hat's gonna be. So you can fold this up, place it on your head, and know that there's gonna be a little circle at the top of your hat, right here. This is what we add to the very top of the hat. So just know that, you can kind of imagine that to be the right, in the right placement on your head and say, oh, is that the right height? As long as you have the height of the hat correct, then you can just work as many rows, as many repeats of that rows 2 to 5 as you want to get the circumference you want. So in that way, it's very, very easy to customize and kind of mess around with the thickness of your yarn, because your row gauge is probably not going to match if you use a thicker yarn. But it doesn't matter, because you can just work fewer rows and sew it together, and that'll work great. All right, so here we are at the end, and then we would just fasten off. So we're just gonna cut ourselves enough yarn so that we can do a whip stitch here. And I'm going to pull that through. Okay, and I'm gonna remove this marker. And then I like to stitch this together with the right sides facing so I can see everything. Oh, and here's another little tip. When you finish working that row, a repeat of row 4, that's when you end your hat as a repeat of row 4, your pieces will fit together. They will nest. See how those little lines fit together? This sticks up, this swoops up here, and that fits right into it. Okay, so that's how you know you've ended at the right place. All right, so we are just going to be working through, the 2 top loops of each edge, and we're just doing a whip stitch, just like this, to sew it together. You can also, I know oftentimes I will do a slip stitch to join these pieces together. That's how I usually like to, when I make something sideways like this, I usually like to do that with a slip stitch. But the reason that I'm doing it this way is because I feel like it blends in much better. And I know that seems weird because we are actually sewing something. And that seems weird. Like, why wouldn't it blend in better if you were crocheting it? But it really does blend in really well, and you can almost not even see this seam after you sew it up. All right, so I'm just matching up. You could pin this all together, but if you are good at recognizing your stitches and you're able to put your needle through the next stitch in each row each time, not accidentally put your needle into a place you've already worked or skip a stitch or whatever. If you're pretty good at recognizing that, then you don't need to pin it, because pinning it is just it's just a 1-to-1 ratio here of stitches, so you really don't need to worry about that. So I skip it because I would probably stab myself running my hand along where those pins are. Okay, and Debbie is saying, yes, it makes perfect sense. Oh, good, okay. So I'm a very visual person, and so it really helps me to teach with like pictures and showing people things. And when I'm just trying to explain something, I know I find myself waving my hands around, but that doesn't actually really help anything. So I'm glad that made sense to you. And Jennifer's saying, Alabama says hi, and thanks a bunch. Can't wait to start. Awesome. Hi, Alabama. All right. So I will get a little further on in. I don't know if I'll finish this whole seam. Just trying to keep my eye on the time and make sure we have time to finish the top. But there is our seam, and you can just barely see it. Okay, it's kind of blending in, and with a little bit of blocking, you should be able to make that kind of wobbliness go away. Okay, so you would just continue sewing these together. Actually, I'll get just a little bit into that ribbed stitch and make sure you guys know what loops you're supposed to go through. Sometimes it can be a little confusing to know which two loops are the loops you're supposed to stitch through, especially when you're using stitches like a half double crochet, because it makes that third loop on the back of your work. So you just have to take a look at it. So right now, here's a V here and here's a V here. Okay, so we're going through this V that's on the top. It's almost rolling to the inside. We're not going through this V that's sitting on this top surface. All right, and here, this one's a little bit less confusing because it doesn't really look very much like a V here. That's from our foundation row there. Okay, so again, we're not going underneath here, but we're going underneath that loop and that loop if I kind of pull it towards the top there. Okay, so just making that whip stitch, and it actually blends in pretty well. And you can just go all the way down to here and then weave in your ends. So after you do that, then you're going to join the yarn to the top of your hat. Let's see here. Just gonna cut this. All right, so in order to work the top little circle, I'm gonna show you how to pick up your stitches. Let's see, okay, so here we are, closing the top of the hat. We're gonna pull up a loop at the top, opening at the seam. So here is our seam right here. Right there. We pulled up a loop, so we just inserted yarn over and pulled up a loop. And then we're gonna single crochet into each ridge around. And then we're not gonna join, we're gonna work in spiral rounds. So what in the world is a ridge? What are you talking about, Brenda, right? So the ridges are formed here. They're the little V's. There's one here, and then there's one neighboring it right there. So there's two ridges between my thumbs right there. This is not a ridge. That's kind of like a little valley between. And here's two ridges right here. Okay, so we have two ridges here, two ridges here. We're going to be working single crochets into the top of each of the ridges. So we'll just insert our hook here, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, and pull through two. I'm going to pull on this yarn tail just a little to make it a little smaller. That was our first stitch of the round. I'm going to mark that because that might be a little hard to see later. And then here's the next ridge right next to it. So we're going to make a single crochet there. We're skipping over that little valley. And when you do that, here's the next ridge. When you skip over these valleys, you want to make sure you're not like extending your loop over here because you don't want any holes. What you're doing is you're bringing that next stitch right next to it. You're keeping this nice and tight. I'm putting a little tension here. So you can make that stitch pretty tight so it's kind of gathering in the top of your hat. And it just gives you a nice place to put those stitches, and that way you don't have to really count it. You just single crochet around, putting one single crochet into the top of each of those ridges as you work your way around. There we go. So another thing, this is just a little bit of troubleshooting while I'm working my way around there. I want to tell you, if for some reason you feel like your hat turned out too long, like let's say you substituted with the number 4 yarn and you're like, ugh, it's too long. You could do just one round of this single crochet, what I'm doing right here. You could work this round, and then you could just run your needle through and cinch it in as best as you can and do some stitches to kind of gather in the top of your hat. It won't look quite as smooth as this, but that's okay. Like the top of a hat looks, that's just a different style. If you don't mind that style of having it be a little bit more gathered in, that will allow your hat to be just a little bit shorter. So that's another route you can take there too. Or if you just plain don't really like how that circle looks on the top of the hat, that's another route for you as well. This hat really is tall enough that even if as you were making it, if you made the correct size and it was all turning out the right length and everything, you could skip that little section of single crochet after this round and just kind of weave your needle through all those stitches and pull it tight if you wanted to, if you like that look to the top of your hat. Because you know what? You're making it, so you can do it your own way. All right, looks like we're coming around here. I'm just going to check and see if anyone has added anything. Nope, looks like we're all caught up. Good, okay. All right, a few more stitches here. And then we will move on. There's just a few rounds. And I know it seems like it's going to take forever because this is pretty big here, but it gets decreased pretty quickly. So we're nearing the end of our hat here pretty soon. All right. So let's see. Yeah, and speaking of that, if you guys are hanging on to any questions that you wanted to ask, if you're curious about anything, or another thing I like is when people make suggestions on projects that they would like to work on in the future. That's a great thing to put in the chat too. All right, so we've made it all the way around, placing our last 2 single crochets into these 2 ridges. This ridge is a little bit sloppier looking because that's where our whip stitch is, but we still worked into it. And there's our very first stitch that kind of got a little stretched out, so I'm going to pull on that. And now we are going to start working 1 single crochet into each stitch around. So just place 1 single crochet into each of these stitches for the next round. So this would be round number 2. Yep, so we're just working even. One thing that I wanted to mention while I am working my way around here is that at 11:30 today, I'm going to be doing another live. It's instead of doing a demonstration though, we're going to be talking about New Year's resolutions. So if anybody is interested in joining that, I welcome you to come at 11:30. I'm going to be talking a little bit about, okay, I'm doing a big reality check with my projects because I have a tendency to, when things aren't working out and I need to do, I switch to a new thing, and then sometimes those old projects just sit. So this is going to be my year of the purge. I'm trying to get everything organized and get rid of all the half-made projects that have just been sitting there neglected, some of them for years. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about that and how I'm deciding what to do with everything. And then we're going to talk about goal setting and that type of thing too. So if anybody's interested in that, please join us at 11:30. We'll be talking about that. All right. I think I will just show you, let's see. Yep. Okay, so you guys don't have to watch me continue making single crochets all the way around this hat. I'm gonna stop here at this halfway point, but just imagine I went all the way around to this point. After that, round number 3, you're gonna be doing an invisible single crochet around, okay? So, and what that means, invisible, oh, that should be an invisible decrease. Oh, I just caught another mistake. Invisible single crochet decrease. Okay, so rounds number 3 and round number 5, you guys. This is a mistake right here in the pattern. So an invisible single crochet decrease. That should be INV single crochet, and then decrease is DEC. Okay, so that's what this should be, and also as well on number 5. That should be the same thing, invisible single crochet decrease. And I will get that corrected after this live, so that if you guys haven't downloaded it already, you will be able to get the fixed up copy. But if you did already download it, I'm telling you right now, you just need to go ahead and change this to, instead of invisible single crochet, it has to be an invisible single crochet decrease. All right, so we're going to be decreasing. Just imagine our hook was over here at the very beginning. So to do an invisible decrease, you're just going to, I do this a little bit differently than some other people, but you can do it the way that you like to do it. I'm just going to show you my version. So what I do is I insert my hook underneath just the front loop of the next stitch, and then I insert my hook under both loops of the following stitch. Then I yarn over and I pull through both of those stitches. Now I have 2 loops on my hook, and then I'm going to yarn over and pull through 2. Let me do that maybe over the white so you can see a little better. Let's do it again. So I insert my hook underneath just the front loop, and then the next stitch I go under both loops. Now this is where my invisible decreases are a little different. Usually people just go underneath the front loops of the next 2 stitches, which is totally fine. You can absolutely do it that way. I like going under the 2 loops of the second stitch because I feel like it has less of a tendency to stretch those loops out. It feels a little bit more anchored, and it pulls the increase together a little more. So I especially like to do this method of the invisible decrease when I'm working on something where I'm trying to bring the fabric in and I don't want to see big gaps there. It just seems to help a little bit, but it's a very minute difference really, you guys. Okay, so we're going to be doing these decreases all the way around the hat. So you're going to be ending up with half as many stitches at the end of your round as in the last stitch. Okay, so underneath that first loop, underneath the second loop, and then yarn over, pull through. First loop, 2 loops, yarn over and pull through. Okay. All right, so maybe we're running short on time, so I think I might just do a few more and then I will show you how to close the top of this hat. And you'll just have to use your imaginations just a little bit because we didn't do our full, we didn't make it all the way around to this stitch marker. So I'm going to be going around to here to do my decreases a little bit here. So that way at least I'll end up with the right amount of stitches, even though I'll have 1 fewer round and half of the top of my hat. I don't know if that makes sense, but because I shortened that 1 row, I just kind of stopped before I was at the end. I'll have 1 less row on 1/2 of the crown of my hat, but that's not even going to be noticeable, I don't think. Okay, insert through the front, under both. There we go. All right, so normally when we get to our stitch marker, we would be done with that round. But I'm going to continue working around because otherwise I'm not going to be able to show you how to close the top of the hat. There we go. And if you are used to doing just a regular single crochet 2 together and you prefer that method, you can absolutely do that too. It doesn't have to be the invisible decrease. I just feel like the invisible decrease pulls it together just a little tighter, and it's a a little bit less bumpy, I guess, than the standard single crochet 2 together. So we don't need to be that picky though. You can do whatever method you want to decrease your stitches so that you end up with half of the stitches that you had from the previous round. All right, I'm probably getting pretty close. Probably getting pretty close to where I started decreasing. And then, so after you've done your 1 round of decreases in round 3, the next round you would just work 1 single crochet into each stitch around. Okay, so I'm going to do that right now. And I'm not absolutely sure that I have the right amount of stitches. I just kind of eyeballed that. And the reason is because I didn't really mark where I started doing my decreases. But if you were following the actual directions and you started decreasing at the beginning of round 3 after you actually completed round 2, then you would be fine. So don't look too closely at the number of stitches that I have here. All right, I'm about halfway there. Oops. And one thing I do want to mention too is at the end of completing the top of this hat, it does look a little kind of wavy and wrinkly where the circle that I'm making right here meets up with that textured stitch pattern. And all you need to do is block it when you're done. And so if you've never heard of blocking or you've never blocked anything before, all blocking means is you're just sort of treating your project with either steam, especially if it's an acrylic fiber, I would recommend steam, or you're going to make your hat or whatever you're making wet, squeeze out as much water as possible, kind of roll it up in a towel, but you don't want to wring it or twist it or stretch it out of shape or anything like that. And then you just let it dry. And so that way you can kind of shape your stitches until everything looks nice and even. All right, so here I am. I'm going to be doing my very last round of decreases. So this should say invisible single crochet decrease around until, and there may be 1 stitch left over, then you just do a single crochet into that last stitch. Don't worry about it. Okay, so we're still doing those same decreases that we did before. So I'm doing inserting my hook under the front loop and then under both loops. That's how I'm doing mine, but you can do yours however you like. But back to the blocking thing, it really does make a difference, especially if you find your stitches to be uneven or, you know, the top of this hat. This is one of those hats that I would definitely recommend blocking because it looks kind of, well, you'll see. When I finish it up, you'll see the little bumps that it has, and I'll show you the blocked version compared to this version, and then you'll see what a difference it makes. But another reason to block your hat, even if you know the stitches weren't uneven or anything like that, another reason to block your hat is to give it just a little bit more softness or drape. This is especially noticeable when you have an acrylic project, and then you use steam on it. It makes your fibers just relax. And it just makes such a big difference. Makes a difference with wool too. And wool, when you get wool, I prefer to block wool with water by soaking it because some wools kind of bloom a little and kind of fill in those spaces and yeah. Okay, so I think I've worked around about the proper amount of stitches are left. But you know, if you're following this and you're just decreasing all the way around, you'll have the right amount of stitches left. And even if you were off by a stitch or 2, it really wouldn't matter. That would not be a big deal. Okay, so we just cut our yarn and then we're going to thread this onto our yarn needle. And if you're using a yarn that's pretty breakable, you could double up on your yarn strands, or you could even close this in with embroidery floss or some other kind of sturdier yarn if you want. This yarn is just fine. You can break it with your hands, but it's not super breakable. So I'm going to be placing my needle into that front loop only to pull this tight. But if you prefer, you can go underneath both loops of that last, you know, the top of that last row of stitches, or round of stitches, sorry. I just find it's a little easier to pull it into a circle that closes the center hole completely if you are only grabbing just that top loop, or the front loop of each stitch. And as I do this, I put my finger in the middle because that helps me have something to press against and not accidentally put my needle through to the other side and snag something over there, because then if you try to gather in the top of the hat, it's going to get kind of messed up. So I always put my finger in the middle of the hole right there at the top of the hat, so that way you're going to keep yourself from accidentally doing that. All right, so we made it all the way around. Just have one more little stitch here. And then we just can go ahead and pull on that and close the top of our hat, just like that. And then we are going to weave in our ends. So with this pulled nice and tight, I go around one more time, sliding my needle through all of those loops. They should be easier to see now if you just kind of place your needle right there through those loops. Let's see, Jennifer is saying, I started a crochet project years ago. It's dust. Should I toss it and start over, or wash it? Oh, it must be dusty. Or wash it when I'm done. I think that depends. If it's dusty, I guess it depends on how much. Well, I guess I would wash it first, because you don't want to keep handling a dusty thing, because you might be kind of rubbing the dust into the yarn and making it much harder to clean. So I would clean it first. Maybe place stitch markers on it, or find some way to finish off the piece that you have. I don't know if it's in pieces or what you have there, but I would wash it now, and then you can wash the whole thing when it's done. That's what I would do. Oh, Tammy says, your woodland mitts were my first crochet project. I made 12 pairs and gave as gifts at Thanksgiving. Everybody loved them. I'm so happy to get the hat pattern. Thank you. Oh my goodness, that's a lot of, that's amazing. And that was your first crochet project? That's pretty cool. Wow, I am honored that you chose my project to be your first crochet project, and that you made so many of them. That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that with us. That just made my day. All right, so I'm just weaving in my ends here. You know, you want to go in a couple of different directions so that your ends don't pop out, and that's it. So now you can see the top of the hat, and maybe this doesn't bother you, but I didn't like how deep these were curling under. So all you need to do is block it, and then it'll look like this one. So you can see the difference here between the top of this hat, which has kind of like a little gentle ruffliness there, and this one that's very shadowy, and you can see the difference. And maybe you like this better, and that's fine. I'm not going to come to your house and check if you blocked it, so you don't have to tell anyone. But I didn't like how that was looking, so I blocked it, and then it was a little bit softer, and it just seemed to get rid of those sort of deeper grooves in it there. So, and then, you know, this of course would have been seamed already. You would just turn that up. And if you were blocking it, you could also kind of steam this a little bit just to kind of set that little fold in it if you wanted to, but you don't have to. All right, I think unless we have any more, okay, it looks like we're all caught up. Okay, thank you guys so much for joining me. I really enjoyed working on this project and kind of coming back around to those woodland myths that I love so much. And I'm glad that so many of you seem to be really liking the stitch pattern. It's deceptively easy. It's much easier than doing cables, and it's nice and warm. You don't get those holes, those telltale holes that sometimes happen between your cables. So this is just a great route to take for this really awesome texture. So thank you guys so much for joining me. I hope to see some of you guys at my next live event at 11:30, and we'll talk about our New Year's resolutions. Okay, bye everyone.